Welcome to the Books of Titans podcast, hosted by Eric Rostad. Join him on his 15-year journey through the immortal books. He'll share what he's learning, explore profound ideas across time and cultures, and share the one thing he always hopes to remember from each immortal book.
Today I'm going to cover Alcibiades and Second Alcibiades by Plato. I had expected to be doing a video podcast by this point, and in the last episode I shared that was my plan for this episode to start with the video podcast. I just haven't gotten in place with all of that yet. I've got a few pieces of furniture and equipment that I need to get set before I can start doing that. So another audio only episode here, but I do plan to get to the video going here soon. I want to share a couple things before I get into Alcibiades, and that is a few statements by Plato that have just been rolling around in my head. And I found it interesting just as I'm attempting to read all the dialogues by Plato, and sometimes I'll have a hard time remembering like an entire dialogue of what the main point was, but I'll remember a certain line, and I'll just be thinking about that line, and it'll just come up in my brain over and over throughout the week. And I'll be tying it together to other things and just thinking about that. So I just wanted to share a couple of those statements that have stuck out. And the first one came from Phaedrus, which is what I covered last podcast episode. And I shared this line, but I just keep thinking about it. And so I want to read the line and then share kind of what it sparked in my mind. And so it goes like this: vision, of course, is the sharpest of our bodily senses. Although it does not see wisdom, it would awaken a terribly powerful love if an image of wisdom came through our sight as clearly as beauty does. But now beauty alone has this privilege to be the most clearly visible and the most loved. End quote. So this comes in a portion of the dialogue where Plato is talking about the forms, and his perception is that our souls lived before they became embodied in us, and our souls saw the true forms, the true form of beauty, and so we catch glimpses of that on Earth, of this vision of beauty that we once had. So there's this idea of vision, of being able to see beauty, and so we know that we see beauty all around us. We see. Yeah, we just see instances of beauty. We hear beauty. But mostly it's something of our sight that we're constantly confronted with beautiful things, with beauty. And he raises this point by saying it would awaken us a terribly powerful love if an image of wisdom came through our sight as clearly as beauty does. So he's distinguishing wisdom and beauty here. What if we could see wisdom? And he says it would awaken a terribly powerful love. And I love that idea, that we can't see wisdom. Maybe we can see a wise person. I remember a friend of mine in high school, and she was telling me about her father one time, and she said, and he was a well-known man, and she said, the best thing about him is that he's wise. And that just stuck out. It was such an interesting thing to hear about somebody, that they were wise. And so we can see wisdom played out, but we can't see wisdom like we can see beauty. And if we could, maybe it would awaken this terribly powerful love in us. And so I've been thinking about that a lot, and I've been thinking about what would that look like? What would wisdom, us being able to see wisdom, and my mind just keeps going to the Proverbs, where wisdom is personified at the beginning of Proverbs. Wisdom is personified as a woman, and so it's almost wisdom becomes embodied in a way. And there's one Proverb 2:10, that says, "For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul." And when I read that, it just makes me think of Ezekiel in 36, where it says, "I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws." And I'll stop reading it there. But just this this idea of what if wisdom was personified, and then you've got these proverbs that kind of go in that direction of wisdom being personified, and just this other proverb 2:10, for wisdom will enter your heart. It's cool. I've really been enjoying thinking about that. The other phrase that really stuck out to me came in this one in Alcibiades, the one of the dialogues I'm going to be talking about today. And there's this part. It says, "Fear is slavery." And the larger sentence in there is, "The bravest man trains him to be fearless and undaunted, because fear is slavery." And if you listen, so one practice I have is I start the year reading straight through the Bible, and even what I just did previously with the wisdom, the personification of wisdom, and tying that to Proverbs. I love starting the year with the Bible and then reading other things and seeing connection points. And so the first year I read straight through the Bible was in 2020, and I did it in between January and February. And one of the main things that stuck out was when I was reading Proverbs, and I came upon the first part of it, and the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I'm thinking, what is the fear of the Lord? And that phrase is such a weird, like, am I supposed to be really scared, that kind of fear, or is it like a holy fear? Like, what does it mean to fear the Lord? And at the end of Proverbs, in Proverbs 29, it says this. It says, "Fear of man will prove to be a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord is kept safe." And it was then when I read that I understood what the fear of the Lord meant, because it was contrasted with the fear of man. And I know all about the fear of man. I live that daily. And I base decisions based on the fear of man and what people will think about me and that kind of thing. And so the contrast of the fear of the Lord versus fear of man. I know fear of man. I'm not supposed to fear man. I'm supposed to fear the Lord. It just kind of helped me put it into, I guess, to understand it. But that idea of fear is slavery. Same thing. The fear of man is a snare. There's an aspect of that fear. Fear is slavery. You lose power when you're fearful, and we see that in ourselves. Like if we're fearful of something or a situation, it's like we can't even act how we know we should. So those two things have been floating in my brain. Don't know if that's helpful or interesting, but to me it's interesting just that certain things of Plato will stick out like that. And yeah, so I'm going through dialogues today. I'm going to talk about some of the main points, but sometimes it's just these sentences that will stick out. So let's get into Alcibiades here. And both of these dialogues, both Alcibiades and then Second Alcibiades, they are discussions between Alcibiades and Socrates. And Alcibiades was an actual person. So some of these dialogues, they'll be named after early Greek philosopher, but Alcibiades here is a politician. We learn about him in Xenophon, and had a big part in the Peloponnesian War. He's also written about by Plutarch. So, but they were friends. Alcibiades and Socrates were friends, and they knew each other for most of their lives, and actually saved each other at different points in battles. And so you can imagine there being a pretty close connection there if you've each saved each other's life in battle. Now, at the temple of Apollo at Delphi, there's this famous saying, you've heard it. It's inscribed on that temple, and it says, "Know thyself." And so Alcibiades here, this first dialogue, it's really an exploration of that idea of know yourself. And there's a question that's posed by Socrates at the beginning, and he asks Alcibiades this. He said, "Alcibiades, would you rather live with what you have, or would you rather die on the spot if you weren't permitted to acquire anything greater?" And from there, Socrates is asking Alcibiades questions, and he asks him about justice and injustice. And he asks Alcibiades, he said, "Who taught you that?" And Alcibiades responds, he says, "Well, I learned about that from people in general." And Socrates says, "And don't people who know something agree with each other and not disagree?" And then later on, Socrates says, "But I know you've seen this sort of dispute over questions of justice and injustice." And he says, these kind of things show up in Homer. Since you've heard of the Iliad and the Odyssey, haven't you? Aren't these poems all about disagreements over justice and injustice? And so I'll stop reading there. But Socrates is pushing Alcibiades on what is just or unjust. And he's trying to show him that Alcibiades doesn't actually know what is just or unjust. He's kind of gone by this general knowledge that he's gathered from people, but how can that be right, he's saying, if people disagree on what justice and injustice is? It's one of the deepest questions, and he's saying this is what Homer is all about, disagreements about these topics. And so Alcibiades shifts the discussion to what is advantageous or disadvantageous, goes into admirable versus contemptible, good versus bad. And Socrates gets Alcibiades to the point where he says, "Not only are you ignorant about the most important things, but you also think you know what you don't know." And so here we're getting into this know thyself, the importance of that. And so let me read from part of it here. So here we go. Socrates says this to Alcibiades. I thought this was so funny. He said, "You are wedded to stupidity, my good fellow, stupidity in the highest degree. Our discussion in your own words convict you of it. This is why you're rushing into politics before you've got an education." End quote. Not a high view there of politicians. And so Socrates continues on. He says, "What are you going to do for yourself? Are you going to remain as you are, or are you going to practice self-cultivation?" And so remaining as he is would be in a state where he doesn't even know about things like justice and injustice. And here Alcibiades is on his way to speak in front of people. And Socrates is just trying to get him to show, what are you going to speak on? What do you even know about these things? And then he goes into this line of questionings of, what do you have, Alcibiades, what do you have compared to what the Spartans and the Persians have? He says, look at the wealth of the Spartans, look at the wisdom and the knowledge of the Persians. And that's where that line of fear is slavery comes in at that point that I shared earlier. And the question is, what kind of self-cultivation do I need to practice? This is what Alcibiades asks Socrates. And what Socrates goes on to say, that the command that we should know ourselves means that we should know our souls. And he contrasts body versus soul. And so to know yourself is to know your soul. And to know oneself is the same as being self-controlled. And Socrates has this line towards the end of Alcibiades that really sums things up. He says, "So it's not walls or warships or shipyards that cities need, Alcibiades, if they are to prosper, nor is it numbers or size without virtue." So the key thing here is virtue. It's not these external things. It's about virtue. Many great books, programs, if they're going through Plato, this is a starting point for many of those programs. They may start with the Apology or some other dialogue, or like the Republic, but this is another one that is a good place to start. And I like that it's connected to that know thyself, because you see that pop up in so much of Greek writing, and it's kind of a dialogue, as I said at the beginning, of an exploration of that idea of know thyself. So a shorter dialogue than most of them, and just kind of an interesting one on that front. For second Alcibiades, it's a little different. Socrates is encountering Alcibiades at the beginning, and Alcibiades is on his way to pray. And so this is where we encounter them. I'm going to read from the beginning here. just a few parts in. In what might preoccupy me, Socrates, and Socrates responds to Alcibiades. The most serious of all questions, in my view, tell me, in God's name, what you think. In public and private prayer, we make requests to the gods. Don't they sometimes grant some of them and not all of them? And don't they say yes to some people and no to others? And Alcibiades says, indeed they do. And Socrates says, so don't you agree that there is a great need for caution? For fear you might, all unawares, be praying for great evils when you think you are asking for great goods? And I'll stop reading there, but that's what kicks this dialogue off, is this idea of prayer, and what should you ask for from the gods? And Socrates later on, he says, it seems then that it is ignorance of the best, failing to know what is best, that is a bad thing. Later on from there, this is what Socrates says. Well, if the God to whom you are on your way should appear to you at this very moment, before you start praying and ask whether you would be happy to get one of the things we spoke of earlier, or whether he should leave the choice of prayer to you, which do you think offers the best prospect? Accepting his offers or making your own prayer? Alcibiades doesn't really know how to answer, and so Socrates says, That poet I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion, who told us to pray to be saved from the evils we pray for, he was wiser than us, wasn't he? Alcibiades says, I guess so. And then Socrates says this, whether in admiration of this poet or because they have worked it out for themselves, the Spartans take the same course in their public and private prayers. They pray the gods to give them first what is good and then what is noble. No one ever hears them asking anything more. End quote. So Socrates then goes on to say that the only truly valuable knowledge is that of the good. Read the last part here. It would be a strange and sorry thing if the gods took more account of our gifts and sacrifices than of our souls, and whether there is holiness and justice to be found in them. End quote. You see a similar line in the Bible where God is not as interested in our sacrifices as he is on this, than our souls, and whether there is holiness and justice to be found in them. So that's first Alcibiades and second Alcibiades. Just some interesting ideas. They're both very short, so kind of fun places to go for Plato's dialogues. I'm always really interested to see when Plato's talking about the soul, and the soul comes up a lot here. Virtue comes up a lot, the good, knowing the good, doing the good, and cultivating your soul. It's interesting when you pick up a lot of if it's a self-help book or something, that's more of a cultivation of your body or cultivation of being productive or a good worker. It's not as much about the soul, but Plato is constantly talking about the soul. He's constantly talking about the cultivation of that. And so I enjoy these dialogues, and those were the main things that stuck out in these dialogues about Alcibiades. So I'll be back in a couple weeks. I'll probably be talking about some other Plato dialogues I've been reading. That's what I'm doing here now between the summer months through the end of November. And then I'm going to spend December reading about trees. So I've started picking up some books on trees, and I'm looking forward to doing that. Well, thank you for listening. I'd love to hear from you if you have read Alcibiades and have some other things to share. And you can follow Books of Titans on Instagram and Twitter, where I'm just at Books of Titans. Also, check out the website. I've revamped it, books.booksoftitans.com. I've got my great authors list there, the authors that I'm going to be reading for this reading project over the next 40 years, and just ways for you to kind of do some interactive things on the website as well. I'll be back again in a couple weeks, and until then, keep reading, keep learning, and keep listening. I'm out.